listening to the Straight to Video podcast with Rob Lane.
Hey, how's it going? Hope you've had a great week, and thanks for diving into a new episode of my show, Straight to Video. Regular listeners to this podcast may well have heard my fun chat with actress Antonia Willens, who stars in the new film I Am Rage, which was released a few weeks ago. Well, following that talk, I dived into the background of both more of Antonia's work, but also the makers of I Am Rage, Clear Focus Movies, and decided it would be fun to chat to David Ryan Keith, the director and writer of I Am Rage, along with the Clear Focus catalogue of films such as The Redwood Massacre and its sequel Annihilation, Ghosts of Darkness and The Dark Within. David is based up in Scotland, and I had a really fun time chatting with him, and I appreciated his stark honesty when it came to indie filmmaking. It's obviously a real struggle to get a film both off the ground but also completed in time and to budget, which we chat all about, along with our mutual love of all things 80s horror and action movies and why they really don't make them like they used to. This straight-to-video podcast is proudly presented to you in association with Affinity Photo, an incredible piece of photo editing software which I've been using for graphic design the past couple of years. It's used to create the podcast episode art what you see each week, and it's an extremely affordable alternative to other programs on the market. So, if you can, please check them out at affinity.serif.com. Alright, let's dive into this week's chat. The new film from Clear Focus Movies, I Am Rage, is out now on all the usual streaming services, and you can check out all the other Clear Focus movies on their YouTube channel by simply searching Clear Focus Movies, or find all the information on their website, clearfocus-productions.co.uk. Right now though, please enjoy my straight-to-video chat with writer-director David Ryan Keith.
Yeah, if I start speaking shit, you can edit it, you can cut it.
Totally.
Okay, good.
So, how's the past couple of weeks been since the release of I Am Rage? Do you keep track of the feedback, or do you just kind of put the film out there and let it do its thing?
I do post-production on other indie movies, so I've been kind of swept up in someone else's movie doing audio post. So I've kind of lost track of where the movie is. But for the first couple of days, yeah, it's hard not to look online, see the feedback, or, if you're brave enough, go on that Letterboxd site.
Is that one of the main ones now, Letterboxd?
I think, my stepdaughter told me this, a lot of the younger generation use Letterboxd rather than IMDb.
Right.
And to be fair, if I look on Letterboxd, there's a lot more interaction on the comment section for good or bad. But yeah, I'd never heard of it before. I'm kind of getting old now.
I got a few years on you, mate. We're all right. We're hanging in there.
Yeah.
Yeah. What has the response been that you've picked in? Do you let any negative comments slide off your back, or are you genuinely interested to see what people say?
I mean, when I first began, you can't help but take it quite personally. It takes a lot of time to make an indie movie. And then when you put it out and it just gets slated hard to begin with, yeah, you're kind of like, I remember I used to answer back to all the trolls at one point.
That's what they want. Just open up them doors for them.
Oh, no, it backfired a few times on me. But I mean, I Am Rage is my 6th movie. And I understand, if people invest to rent an independent film, it's fair game. I walked out of Indiana Jones like $300 million, and I was like, it's terrible.
You actually walked out?
No, at the end, I made it to the end.
Oh, when you actually left the cinema, you was like, damn.
Yeah, I was like, that was bad, even though technically it's brilliant. But so indie movies are fair game, and I would say an easy target if it's done wrong. So no, I'm used to it now. There's a lot of good and bad when you make these kind of films.
Favorite Indiana Jones film then, out of the others?
My favorite one is The Temple of Doom.
Yes!
I don't know why.
Mine as well. Me and my friend, it's always Temple of Doom.
Yeah, I like the first one and the third one, but it's more kind of, I wouldn't say fantasy film. I don't know. It was more of a spectacle movie for me when I was a kid.
And it never lets up. It
was more over the top.
It never lets up right from the start.
No, once it starts, once the action starts, yeah. I know people will be shouting, Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it's not as entertaining.
Yeah, Raiders is a bit more of a slow burn. It's got some amazing set pieces in it, but just for like full-on momentum and great time.
Yeah, it's like I showed my 5-year-old kid Temple of Doom. I skipped past the heart bit, but he was sitting there open-mouthed, in the train car chase and all that. And for me, that's what movies are all about, isn't it? It's like good fun.
I only found out about the unedited Heart version fairly recently, where I never remember actually seeing his hand go into the guy's chest and pull out a heart.
Oh, is there?
Yeah, if you go on YouTube and search for, I don't know, Indiana Jones cut heart scene or something, you actually see his hand go in, pull the heart out, and it seals up again.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have to look for that.
It's wild.
Yeah, because I was like skipping it forward for my son, but gee whiz.
Yeah, it's all there, laid on the screen. It's mad. Speaking about, like you're saying, indie films are like fair game and stuff like that, and somebody actually said it, another like director, producer friend of ours, he says, any film that gets to the finish line, people don't realise the amount of work that goes into it. Any film that gets to there has to be commended just to get to that point.
Yeah, I guess it's hard to explain. Independent movies normally shot in impossible time frames, not enough money, and everything that's on the screen is literally all you can put on the screen. So it's just like madness making these movies. But then again, I'm not going to be in everyone's house telling them, oh, by the way, it's an independent film. So people watch this on their own merit. And, if the film's bad, it's going to get slated. If it's good, it will get good reviews. So I'm just like, yeah, okay, next movie. That kind of thing.
Speaking of like timeframes and stuff, though, did I hear you mention that from blank page of a script to shooting commenced on I Am Rage, it was just a month?
It was just over a month.
That is unreal.
It's always the way it's been for the movies I make. I think what happens is my investors are from Los Angeles, but they get the money, they get a sniff of the money, and they panic because the money can quite easily just disappear into another project. So even though it might be agreed, we're going to pay towards your movie, if you're not quick enough, someone might come in with a better idea and it's gone. So as soon as they get a sniff of the money, they'll blag it saying there's a script or whatever, and then we'll be like, write as fast as we can and get a production date to secure everything to make sure the movie's actually going to get made.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. And then, of course, you only get like 18 days to shoot a movie. Regardless if I made a horror film or an action film, it's always 18 days. So it's like a whirlwind experience. And at the end of it, you just kind of come back home and you're just like, what just happened? It's the weirdest thing. You start watching the footage back because it's been so intense shooting. It's like watching it for the first time when you're editing. So yeah, indie films.
Did you ever think that filmmaking would be like that when you first started getting into the industry?
Well, I worked for a small film company in Scotland, and that was more like traditional filmmaking where you had a lot of time, a lot more money. You would see the directors, or if it was commercials, they would have endless time to shoot a couple of shots per day. So it was a bit like the studio system that everyone thinks, when they think about making movies. And then when you come to independent cinema and they're like, you've got like a 5-minute fight scene to shoot, but you've got like 1 hour go, it's a quick baptism of fire into, how quickly you really got to shoot these things.
Do you think there's some positives you can pull from that as well? Like you were saying, like when you look back on the footage, it's like, I can't even remember doing this, or how did we get this done? And you're constantly learning or surprising yourself.
I've worked on some big short movies where they have endless time, and the process of them talking about a scene endlessly, when they actually go to shoot it, it kind of just falls flat because everyone's even the crew's so bored by that point. So, indie film, you're moving so quick. You've really got to rely on the actors to kind of pull you through the misforgivings, I'll say, of the script. So you're constantly fixing and moving with no breaks, basically. And some good stuff can come out of that because you don't have time to overthink it. You just do it, and then you're off to the next scene. But obviously, sometimes that doesn't work out when you look back and you're like, oh man, that's pretty bad.
Good with the bad.
Yeah, 50-50.
I spoke to Antonia Willens recently, who played Sarah in I Am Rage, and I said the film reminded me a little bit of The Hunt from a few years ago. I don't know if you saw that film.
Yeah, a long time ago.
But also You're Next, which I thought was a fantastic horror movie. It's about 10 years old now. I don't know if that one ever came onto your radar.
I watched that, when it first came out. But to be honest, this movie was based on old like Van Damme films. When they wanted to do an action movie, and obviously we don't have money for explosions or car chases, I thought martial arts. And I'd recently watched Hard Target again for the first time in like 20 years, and it was so over the top stupid. I thought if we, if we kind of place I Am Rage in a hyper visualized world where, like they're doing martial arts and it's not really explained why anyone's doing martial arts, that kind of thing, I thought that might be our saving grace or our downfall. if it doesn't work out. But yeah, just drawing on all those kind of cheesy movies that I watched when I was a kid.
Yeah, I love seeing the martial arts on screen. It was that flashback to like late 80s, early 90s stuff for me. It was great to see it on screens. I know there's been some martial arts films in the past few years with like things that jump to my mind, like The Raid, which has been like that real like high-end, like whatever you want to call kind of martial arts. But it was just great just to see that old school style of fighting on the screen again. I loved it. I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah, like we purposely put in a final fight, for the end of the movie, which I haven't seen like one like that with women. Obviously, you have films with guys, they're always fighting at the end, but this was like...
all leading to like a Roadhouse scene at the end.
Yeah, basically it was Roadhouse. Exactly. We built it up to the Roadhouse finale. This is true.
I need to know why you was watching Hard Target again. Was this some research, or of all the films I'm going to pull from the shelves, I'm going to go with Hard Target?
I went through, I can't remember. I used to watch back in the day when I was like in my young, late teens, maybe like the Schwarzenegger, Van Damme, Stallone. And I started going back and rewatching them, which I found it was a weird experience because I'd seen them so many times when I was a kid, but I've forgotten. So when you're watching them back, they seem quite familiar in a really weird way. So it was kind of just watching those movies. I was like, yeah, it's time to, if I'm going down with this movie, I'm going down the old 80s and 90s way.
Well, both you and I, we grew up in like a magical time for films. The amount of like legendary films that came out in the 80s alone, it was just insane. But we also had the video shop boom as well, where absolutely anything was possible. Was you a video shop kid growing up, or did you prefer the cinema?
Video. It was very rarely when I was a kid. We used to go to the cinema. It was more like Jurassic Park, E.T. or that kind of stuff. But I used to, like probably you did, used to go to the video store and just like stand there for like 45 minutes looking at the back of covers for movies, that kind of thing. So when you look at the movies back then, they're all kind of event movies in a weird way. Like say Big Trouble in Little China, Jurassic Park, E.T., and now they're just banging them out. So many movies now, they're all becoming quite generic, where you never really remember any of them and you never really go back and rewatch them, even though there's really good movies being made, but it just doesn't have the same... Maybe that's just a generational...
I would say like the only event movies now are Marvel films.
Even now, I think people are starting to kind of wane. I think they've covered it to death and there's nothing really coming up. They're rolling out Indiana Jones again, all the old movies from the 80s, 90s. So it's like weird times.
It is, definitely. I mean, like, because, say, I think I just did something from like 1987, like picking which of like 1 month, and just all totally different films which came out, which became so well known and iconic, but just totally different to everything else. I don't know what the vibe was in the industry at the time, whether people were more open to different scripts or taking a chance back then. I've no idea, but every few months you'd have like an iconic film that came out, or whether I'm looking at it with rose-tinted glasses, but I don't think I am, because everyone has the same impression.
No, like even when I show my stepdaughter some of the older movies, say like I'm trying to get her to watch like say RoboCop, but when she does invest some time in some of the older movies, she loves them. So yeah, they're much better. I will say it, yeah, they're much better than the movies they make today. And they still, I mean, they hold up-ish, but yeah, I think that's why people keep going back to revisit those kind of films.
Even like the massive films, I always mention like stuff like Star Wars, which people consider like, well, it is one of the biggest and best films of all time. But when you see the making of documentary, it is almost like an indie film. It's flying by the seat of its pants. Anything could fall through at any moment. Nowadays, films just have so much planning and so precision in how they're made. But all these classic films, like Jaws, for example, this famous story how the shark kept breaking and there was just so much downtime. Things weren't running smooth on them.
Not a lot of people know, but Empire Strikes Back and was it Return of the Jedi? They were indie movies. They were self-funded away from the studio. So it shows you there's hope. There's hope.
Other than like Van Damme films, which films in particular do you think like really defined you, or perhaps ones you just watch over and over again?
Sounds bad because most filmmakers want to sound artistic or whatever, but I still am.
No, go for it.
I like popcorn movies. You know what I mean? I like watching movies that I don't have to, invest in that much, and they tick all the boxes, even though I've seen it 100 times before. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I tried to watch, especially for I Am Rage, I started watching a lot of action movies, recent ones, and it just, I don't know. It did feel kind of redundant in a weird way. I can't even remember the ones I watched. But then you go back to say like Die Hard, RoboCop, all the classic movies. I think, yeah, they did the good ideas in the 80s, 90s, and they've been copying them ever since.
Because you're a big John Carpenter fan. His work is really broad and spans quite a few genres. Which films of his do you particularly love? You mentioned Big Trouble in Little China. Is that one that's head and shoulders above the rest, or is there some others?
Yeah, I love Big Trouble in Little China because it's like a good fantasy, entertaining movie.
It's like nothing else.
Yeah, it's like total crazy for its time, and it still looks good.
I don't know how you'd actually pitch that film to somebody.
No, you could never make half these movies nowadays, though. Say off a heap of movies made back in the 90s, 80s that would never get made now, like The Fly. It's like, it's a hard one to pitch.
Well, they are apparently remaking Big Trouble in Little China, aren't they? That was the word a few years ago with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson in the...
We'll see. I think that's...
Kurt Russell role. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, they remake everything now, so I wouldn't be surprised.
What other John Carpenter films?
Oh, God. I find him an interesting director because visually he's quite static. There's actually nothing flashy about the way he makes his movies, but the stories, they live. They're, like stuff like that I used to love when I was a kid.
The ultimate slow burn film.
Yeah. So for me, he's quite interesting to watch because it's quite a simplistic way he makes movies compared to like now or some of the movies even made back then. But there's something about the way he does it that is totally different. It might be just because he does his own music that makes them different. I don't know. But yeah, he's a weird one.
How long do you think they spent on that fight scene in They Live?
Oh, my word. I think they spent like a week, didn't they?
Probably.
Yeah.
What is it, about 12 minutes, something like that?
It's a long fight, yeah. And it's brilliant.
A lot of your films are based around the Aberdeen area. Is that where you grew up?
Yeah. So I was born in Aberdeen and, I worked in the film industry for about 9 years before we started up our own company. And ever since, we've kind of been trying to claw our way out of the UK and shoot in the US, but they keep coming back over to Scotland and it doesn't make sense because of the exchange rate and that. But I think for the American producers and distributor, the scenery in the UK is something different to look at, as opposed to I might go to Las Vegas and shoot in a desert and they're like, well, we've got like 2,000 of those movies. So I'm constantly trying to get to shoot in the US and constantly they're wanting to come here. So that's where we're kind of stuck at the moment, unfortunately.
I mean, some of those opening scenes in I Am Rage, when I spoke to Antonio, I was like, my initial thing was like, where is this? Is this in like Switzerland or something like that? And then it's like, no, it's up in Scotland. It looks incredible.
Yeah. I mean, for the opening of the movie, we were deep in Scotland. It was... Even for me, I'm Scottish, but they are Scottish, if you know what I mean. It's like I couldn't understand half the time what the locals were saying. But yeah, it was kind of weird because it was a very small town. There's a lot of like the Mason cult. I remember the bar owners told me that one bar is warring with the Mason-owned bar, and they weren't very friendly. True story. When I was up there, I was on the phone to my wife, and I was like, they're pretty hardcore here. I said, just as I said that, someone drove by and threw like a milkshake off me. So it's like one of those, you couldn't even make it up. So yeah. Hardcore Scottish people.
Did they warm to you by the end of those, 16, 18 day shoot?
Ooh, we were up there it was called Lairg it was only maybe 10 days. And I mean, they're like hardcore agricultural farmers. So they just look at people, that make movies like we're idiots. And obviously with a lot of them Americans going about, like, hey, everybody, they weren't having any of that, trust me. So it was an interesting experience. And the main house we shot at was owned by like a classic rich English family that had come up for summer and then kind of retreat back down to England. So it was like a mixture of the weirdest of Scottish and the stereotypical of what you'd expect like a rich English family would be. So it was, it's very surreal. You mix that in with making a movie and it's easy to the lines of reality start to blur.
Yeah.
Should I say.
So where you grew up, where was your local video shop?
Well, we had like a big Asda supermarket up here and they used to have a big video store in there years ago. And even now they used to have DVDs on the shelves, but I've noticed now they're all gone.
Somebody told me the other day that Asda was kind of one of the last stands for physical movies, especially for indie films, because they kind of got on the shelves quite a bit.
Yeah, I think even for I Am Rage, in the end, they decided not to even put it on DVD. They've got it like on a demand thing. If you want for DVD, they'll make it specifically. But they were like, the demand now in the US is next to non-existent. It's all VOD, which is kind of sad in a weird way, because if they were to remove this from, say, the platforms, the film would be gone forever, which is crazy.
It's quite an unusual thing because I'm still big into like video collecting and VHS and stuff like that. And I heard something the other day that the bootleg market for VHS is just going through the roof, where people are doing like the custom covers of like modern films, making them into VHS format and actually putting the films on there. And it's getting so popular that it's getting out of control of the big studios that they're actually just giving up trying to shut it down. They're just letting it go.
I mean, I got the surprise of my life when I looked at the price for VCR machines. I was like, oh my God, it was like £600 now. But I don't know, there's something, I think when they moved from film to digital, the physical thing of film and them playing it in the cinema, that gone. And now even when you finish a movie and you export and you've just got like 6 months of work on this little clip and you just put it on a hard drive and off, it's a weird thing. It's like, I can never get used to it.
Yeah, we're from this generation where it constantly feels weird for us, whereas like I guess your kids and younger generations, it's just the norm.
Oh my God, yeah, they wouldn't even know what a VHS is or a tape or...
I found that interesting. A few people have said that. Like, I was born in 74, so I can remember the very tail end of the 70s growing up in the 80s. I never had 8-track tapes, but I knew what they was.
Mm-hmm.
I was familiar with the journey of how audio and video is consumed, but now kids don't even understand what a videotape is. They perhaps recognize a DVD and that's about it. It's strange that that knowledge totally passed them by.
I mean, it is, I guess, really is video on demand. It's just a click away. Anything now is just a click away. Even back in our day, we put the VCR in. Now kids are just like, beep, next, beep, 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 beep. And even when you make indie movies, they always want a start. You've got like 2 minutes of attention, a window before the new generation will switch off. So we're always like forced to put in something really quick at the start to see if we can grab them before they kind of on to the next movie.
Ain't no way they're getting through They Live because nothing happens for about 55 minutes.
And that, yeah, it's the weirdest thing. It's the weirdest thing. I find that TV shows are way too dragged out and the movies now are just way too quick and compact. There's no middle in between.
Was there a particular event that influenced you to pick up a video camera? Because I think you was like 12 years old when you first began messing around with a camera.
It was just like I really did watch a lot of movies when I was younger. And I think because it was VHS, you would buy a VHS and you would watch that VHS over and over and over again. And I just remember getting to the point where I'd seen a movie so many times that I just started watching the way it was made. Just randomly one day I was like, oh, and it just kind of clicked for me. I was like, well, I could try that. And then obviously from the age of 12 to 18 was just like messing about with my friends, trying to emulate making movies until I got a job in the industry. And then it was 10 years of watching other people make movies. So yeah, it was a kind of, a natural progression to the point now that I'm 42, still making indie movies, like questioning life, like, what am I doing?
What was some of those very first projects? Do you remember?
Just hundreds of little movies that you make with your friends that never get finished. And then as I got older, we started to try and do short movies. It was actually, we'd done a short horror film and we went down to Margate, is that it? Down in England. We won like a heap of awards and one of the judges was from Working Title Film. And he came up, he basically said, look, fair dues for winning the awards, but short films are ultimately pointless. It's a good learning ground, but you're not going to make any money or come into the industry. You need to think about feature movies. And that was really the first time we went, oh, yeah, feature movies. So that was the kind of spring for me and my wife to take the risk to start up our own company.
Your friend, is it Liam Matheson? He's been working alongside you for a lot of your journey.
Yeah, Yeah, he was in all my movies when we were younger. And he's like, I've kind of dragged him into each movie. He was in the first Redwood Massacre, we self-funded. And even today, we'll like read through the scripts together just to make sure, we're at the shorthand level now when we're making a movie.
Will he be brutally honest with you as well?
Oh, he's very honest. He's very honest.
That's shit. What you put that in there for?
Oh, my word, yeah. Like now and then I'll go round to his house and have a few drinks and he'll put on like one of our old movies and he'll be the first to tell me if it worked out or not.
You mentioned starting the company with your wife. What pushed you to make that jump and do that? And how scary was that? And what convinced you to like pull the trigger? Because that's a huge, was it a leap of faith?
It was a kind of forced move. I did 8 years as like a professional avid editor. And when there were shoots, I'd go out, either be the sound recordist or the camera operator. And it was just kind of 8 years of watching other people kind of live out their dreams. And a lot of the time seeing them doing it badly. So we were kind of spinning in the ground, making short films. And it was really my wife who kind of said, if you're going to do this, you got to do it now and we take the risk. So, I mean, looking back, it was a really stupid thing to do. And our first film was an even stupider idea to try and break into the industry. But to a certain extent, it's worked. I mean, like most of our money is like corporate business. And we'll do like a movie maybe once every 2 years. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of benefits from being your own boss, I guess. Obviously, like I'm on about doing movies and sound and all that, but now and then I'll meet people that are working real jobs and I'm like, actually, I haven't got it that bad.
What did your family think of you going into like the filmmaking industry? Because usually like anything that's creative, most people can't say, well, that stays a hobby.
They still think like that. They don't quite understand it. They never really have, to be honest. Okay. Yeah, like I think my dad, he came to the premiere of I Am Rage and he kind of appreciated it. But I don't know, like movies and all that for them is like Hollywood, that kind of thing. So it's hard to explain to them, especially when I was younger. Oh, I want to be in the film industry. They're like, you know what I mean? What a waste of time.
What was your vision for Clear Focus back then when you started, and how has that changed over time with being full-time in the industry? And I guess things are constantly changing. I guess you've really had to adapt to survive.
You know what it was? Our first film was called Attack of the Herbals. And I mean, it was a terrible movie. It was a genre kind of comedy horror. That's the type of movies I like to make. But even though the film was really bad, we got distribution on our own merit. And then when we went to try and get help to try and make more movies, whatever they were called, Creative Screen at the time, everyone really was like, you're stupid for making these kind of movies. We're looking for like artistic movies, not genre films. And then obviously you look across to the States where genre films, that's where the money is made. Like I can go out and film a flower for 90 minutes and probably win awards here, but would never get distribution. Otherwise, you have people in America making films about killer clowns. It's ridiculous that are progressing their career. So it was more about setting up a company to try and do the opposite of what everyone was telling us to do here, which was to make genre films, kind of popcorn movies that ultimately sell internationally. So that's kind of why we look to do horror movies. There's already an established audience. So we're not making films trying to find an audience. We're making movies for that audience. So it was like just kind of using your common sense of how the business works of films, which is making the movie is a very small part. The rest is actually the business of selling movies. And that's what I think a lot of people, when you're younger, kind of get caught up in the creative. I'm going to make a movie and it's going to be about, this feather that floats in the air for 10 minutes. And then they go and try and sell it. And they're just like, well, we're not buying that. No one's going to watch it. But, you'll win all the awards, no doubt.
Did you have any contacts in the US when you started? Or was it reaching out, seeing what other people were doing in the horror community and approaching those people?
We got really badly screwed over in our first movie. It was with a US sales agent and distributor. And it was kind of a huge learning experience for us after the dust had settled. And we'd kind of figured out how they screwed us. It put us in motion to really learn the ins and outs of how, say, sales agents or distributors take advantage of filmmakers to make money.
Very similar to the record industry, I would imagine, as well.
I bet it's exactly the same. It's just set up to screw you. And after kind of getting knocked back for making my first movie is called Attack the Herbals. So when you go to pitch a movie for funding for a second, they're like, what was your first film? I'm like, oh, it's about Nazis and zombies. They're just like, so we had to fund our second movie, Redwood Massacre. So we funded it ourselves and we really came up with a formula of how we were going to approach distributors and kind of looked into how the contracts work, the audience for slasher films, and approached it more like a business venture rather than making a movie in a weird way. which, like the movie suffered because of that, because it's like a slasher film, the usual. But that kind of got us through the door to speak to international distributors. And that was the start when we finally got the distribution deal for Red Room Massacre and understood where they could possibly screw us over and changing the contracts and then ultimately making the distributor money. That's when the doors open. Oh, well, we'll give you more money. Probably he's going to screw you somewhere along the lines, but not as badly. But, that's where the funding starts to come in, which is the hardest part of trying to make movies.
Your film, Redwood Massacre, that came out 10 years ago, I believe.
Yeah, it was like 10 years ago. Yeah, 10 years of hardcore trolls attacking me for making that movie.
Well, you got to revisit that world with Redwood Massacre Annihilation recently, which I really enjoyed. Quite a big American cast, most notably Danielle Harris from the Halloween and Hatchet series of films.
Yeah, the distributor, he said the Scottish accent is like nails down a chalkboard to where he is in America. So he was like, moving forward, there's going to be no Scottish actors in your movies. And I was like, oh, well, that's going to be quite awkward to the local actors here. But again, he's just thinking of a more broader audience, and America's where it's all at. But yeah, Danielle, I don't know how we managed to get her. Still think to myself now, how did we get Danielle Harris? But yeah, she was over here in Aberdeen.
Yeah, that's for me was like the perfect casting for the audience of these films as well, because everyone in this kind of horror community now knows of Danielle Harris. I thought that was like bang on. How was that whole experience for you, having people fly over to the UK for your shoot with such time restraints? Do you get a feel for people really quick and you have to try and bond really fast and like thinking on your feet?
No, wow. It was really awkward with Danielle to begin with. I mean, she knew it was a low budget movie and she flew into Aberdeen and she had like her 6-month-old kid and she had a nanny with her. So as soon as she came in, she was just like, hi, boom, off to the hotel. We're shooting the next day. We had this new camera that just come out and on the first shot, it broke down. So she's waiting in this other set and we're like 2-3 hours late. So I could tell she was sitting there. She was on her phone. I could just tell. She's like...
To her agent, what is this? Where am I right now?
What have I got myself into? But, I mean, towards the end, she was so good. She was so nice. And she really... It was a difficult movie to make. And she's done these movies, like so many of these movies. And we ran so far in schedule. And it was really down to her that we made it up. Rather than me having to direct someone talk about it, we had such a shorthand. She's like, I've done this scene 2,000 times before. Where do you want me to start? Where do you want me to end? And that's how we caught the movie back up. So it's kind of, I owe her, a big thank you for, pulling the movie to the finish line. Could have been someone who was just like, I'm just going to let these guys sink. But she was all in towards the end. And I'm kind of disappointed I never got more time with her because some of her behind-the-scenes stories were brilliant, from Hollywood.
She's probably a little bit younger than us or similar age, but she's been in the industry. I don't know how old she was when she did those first Halloween films, but she was super young. So she's had several decades in the industry.
She had like Bruce Willis stories, Steven Seagal stories, Sylvester Stallone stories. And the movie she did before coming over to do Red Room Massacre was Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She was in that for a brief moment.
Right, I didn't know that.
A lot of her scenes had to get cut in the end because she was pregnant. So she had to go to hospital, but she's in there. So I was like, oh, what's the last movie you just done? She's like, oh, I did it with Quentin Tarantino. So I'm like, oh dear. Well, welcome to Aberdeen.
It's a great cast of characters which came together for that film, though. Everyone's got their own style and personality. I thought it was a real, almost like an action hero group.
Yeah, it's probably my favorite film because I think we cast it perfectly, but the film didn't do well. It just came out and disappeared. So I'm kind of lucky I got I Am Rage because normally, you're only as good as your last film financially. So maybe one day Red Room Massacre 2 will make money. One day.
Like we were saying earlier, the direct-to-DVD and video-on-demand market, it's pretty huge, well, especially the video-on-demand thing. There's a massive choice of films available. Are there any other filmmakers within this field who you particularly admire on the way they work, or any films you've enjoyed, or anyone you've got to know over time? Or are you so busy on your own thing?
I don't even watch indie movies. I mean, this sounds terrible, but I probably wouldn't even watch my own movies. Like, I'll watch the logos come up, and if I know if it's an indie movie, I'm like, ugh. And it's not, it might be a brilliant movie or, a bad movie, but I spot indie movies and it just reminds me of the way we make movies, and I can't kind of disengage from that.
That's why I was wondering if you was like so deep in your own stuff as well. because same as me doing a podcast. I used to listen to podcasts all the time. Now I hardly listen to them at all. I kind of want to, but...
Well, that's the thing. You start, especially for indie movies, you start to not actually watch the film. You're starting to listen to the sound, the way they're making it. Before you know it, it's like being at school watching how someone's made a movie. So I like watching the Hollywood movies where I can just be like a normal person and have escapism for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Now that you've done I Am Rage and got a taste for making your own action movies, would you like to do more?
Yeah, we've got another one coming up, hopefully at the end of September. This time we've got a script. Because of the SAG strikes, it's like a weird thing with the casting at the moment. So it might be like, this was a much bigger movie and it got cancelled when COVID hit. So it's kind of come full circle, but it's kind of up in the air because they're pushing to have known names in the movie. And now with the SAG strikes, it's a standstill. But yeah, I got to keep making the movie. You know, I can't really afford just to wait 6 months. So it's one of those things, I don't know if we'll just cast in the UK again, like I Am Rage. But one way or another, we're going to be making that movie.
Is this the Ben and Sarah experience? I've seen that.
Yes.
Yeah. Because that sounds like it would sit right in the Black Mirror universe.
Yeah, it's got like a sci-fi twist, horror, action, martial arts again, and something different. You know, I've done so many horror films. There's only so many times you can film people walking about slowly, looking and shouting, hello? So kind of like the action movies because it's so different. I mean, it's the same tropes in a kind of weird way. You're ticking the boxes, but it's more entertaining for me, for my own sanity, when you're kind of stuck making these things.
I noticed you've also started your own YouTube podcast chats with directors. You've done one with David Worth, who worked on Bloodsport and Kickboxer. That must have been a thrill for you. Who else would you like to get on there?
I nearly had Sheldon, is it Lettish, the director of Line or AWOL, whatever it's called. I think it's kind of weird because these guys are more accessible now and they're more open to talking to random people. I think there's something really cool about speaking, like the guy David Worth. It was kind of a weird thing for me because I was like, oh, I'm finally getting to ask some of the questions I always wondered about. But back in the day, you would never have been able to speak to someone like that. So I'm trying to make time, and I'm kind of lucky because my subscribers are kind of growing because of the movies on our channel. So it looks good. So it's becoming a bit easier for me to reach out to people because obviously they check you out. And if you've got like one subscriber, it's probably not going to work out. But yeah, I kind of enjoyed speaking to him, actually.
I think it's a pretty cool angle. Is that the angle you go down, like specifically talk to like directors? So it'd be like director with director. I think it'd be a real cool slant.
At the moment, it was like reaching out to the guy who directed The Running Man, the Starsky and Hutch guy. Like movies like that, movies that people used to love and have kind of forgotten. They don't really have many behind the scenes for these movies. So they're kind of like a mystique around the old films. So it's cool to kind of pry to see what really happened, you know, in those movies. That David Worth guy had some pretty funny stories about Van Damme, so found it interesting for myself.
Well, I hope you continue that because, I mean, I found it really interesting. And I think that'd be a great angle, like director on director, and you could just ask stuff you would have asked.
See, well, that's the thing. Because you're a podcast, I find it hard. You're always thinking of the next question. I get caught up listening to them. So sometimes when they finish, I'm just kind of like, you know, so I'm still trying to learn that part of interview podcast style, I guess.
Well, they say listening is the hardest part and the best thing. People say, oh, you let this person just talk. You didn't interrupt them all the time and all this kind of thing. You was listening to them. So if you got that down, you're fine.
It's just when they stop dead, they answer something and you're just like, oh, shit.
And did I see you have some stuff coming up at some horror cons in Scotland?
Yeah, there's a local company in Aberdeen that started doing horror cons. There's not much like that up here. So the girl, Laura from Northern Frights, has kind of risked it all to start up her own like fantasy con, horror con. And it's tough up here. People aren't interested really in movies or any of that kind of stuff yet. But if you go like 2 hours down from Aberdeen to, let's say, Glasgow, completely different. And then obviously you're in England, right? It's huge. So I'm kind of tagging along with her to begin with, see what happens. I mean, that's the dream, right? You just go to horror cons and sell your Blu-rays.
Is that what you'll be doing, like having a stall for Clear Focus?
Yeah, we did it last year. Like, obviously, people in Aberdeen are just like, what's Redwood Massacre? I've never heard of it. But it was good. We sold heaps of like merchandise from the film, and it was kind of good doing something locally, I guess, as opposed to normally I'm just like, it's America. That's where the business is, you know. So it was kind of cool. It's hard for any artistic endeavour up in the northeast of Scotland, let's put it that way.
Did you have the premiere for I Am Rage up there as well?
Yeah, we ended up doing it in a small town outside of Aberdeen, the city. You know what? The interest is just not... It's just not here, up here. It was hard to even get people to turn up to it, as opposed to like my producer friends, like say in Los Angeles, who could film a street for 5 minutes and they'd get like a premiere, in Los Angeles packed. There's just something, I don't know what it is about the north of Scotland, but the interest is just, if I was to say, I'll make movies, there'd be no shits given by anyone up here.
Oh, man. Have you been out to America much?
Yeah, I went out to LA. We went to Universal Studios. We had a movie company in Universal Studios, which sadly didn't happen. So we went out into Universal Studios, did the whole tour, did the meetings, talked to the studios. And then, like so many films, the plug just got pulled at the last minute. So I was just like, it was a hard one to take at the time because I was like, oh my God, I've made it. I'm sitting beside Steven Spielberg's building, having a meeting about doing like a terrible movie. That was a hard one. And then Ben and Sarah, that got picked up by the writer of Michael Bay movies. And then COVID killed that. So yeah, I've had some punishing career lows.
Does it make you thicker-skinned?
It's just because I'm getting older. I'm like 42. So it feels like I'm kind of spinning on the ground a little bit. And then you kind of finally get through the gates. And then you're kind of just knocked back to where you were. It really is, especially like Los Angeles, in that it's who you know, not what you can do. I mean, I met more people in Los Angeles in 2 weeks and more different avenues of making a movie than I've done in the UK my whole life.
It's unreal, isn't it? That's when you do realise I'm a big music fan. I love all the bands from like the late 80s, early 90s. And when I first went out there, I saw all these clubs, which legendary, iconic, all like on the same couple of blocks. I'm like, wow, I can't imagine that all this stuff that changed the face of the music I love just came from this tiny little area. It's just such a hub for everything.
I mean, it could drive you mad, I think, living out there for sure. I mean, even at the end of the 2 weeks, I was filmed out talking about movies, going into 7-Eleven, and the guy's like, I'm a screenwriter. It's like, Jesus, I didn't even ask. Like, everyone's just talking about movies, and I can imagine the same with music. It's just like a constant networking event that is 24 hours a day, and which is amazing to begin with. Like, I was like, oh my God, it's Hollywood. But then you realize it's cutthroat, backstabbing, it's hard.
David, I'm going to end with a question. I'm going to put you on the spot, but it's a question I've begun asking people to kind of wrap things up. It's a Friday night in the late 80s, early 90s, and you're on the way to the video store. What movie soundtrack do you have on the Walkman, and which 3 films do you pick for the weekend?
Probably put the RoboCop score on for the Walkman. 3 movies. Let's see. God, that's a hard one. So many movies. Well, I got to pick Big Trouble in Little China. I got to put that one, I guess. Say Terminator 2. I never get tired of watching that.
That was such an event film.
Yeah.
We spoke about event films back in the day.
And you know what? I'm going to put Titanic as my third one. I've grown to love that movie.
Well, that was like one of the last, what do they call them, cross-generation films where everybody went to see. I even took my grandma to see Titanic.
Yeah, and it's actually, I think it's got better with time, actually, watching it back. It's not as cheesy. Well, it's so cheesy, but I appreciate it.
It's so cheesy, it's not cheesy. It's broke through the barriers of cheese.
It's just a good movie.
Totally. Good answers. David, thanks ever so much for chatting with me. I've really enjoyed that.
No props. Been a pleasure.
I look forward to diving into, there's so much stuff on your YouTube channel, all the behind the scenes stuff for I Am Rage. I think it's great that you put all that together, all the interviews with the cast members and everything. So once people have seen the film, there's plenty to dive into there as well.
The illusion is broken. They can see how the movie was actually made.
Oh, that's what we want though. We want those DVD extras. It's wicked. But yeah, it's been great to hook up. I look forward to what happens next for you.
Brilliant. Cheers, Rob.
Many thanks to David Ryan Keith for spending some time with me on this week's Straight to Video podcast. Really enjoyed hearing all about the production and hard work that goes into his films, despite all the odds stacked against him, and I look forward to seeing what he does next. As mentioned, the new film I Am Rage is out now on all the usual streaming services, and you can check out all his other films on their YouTube channel by simply searching Clear Focus Movies, or find everything you need at clearfocus-productions.co.uk. If you enjoyed this talk, then please dive back and check out my interview with Antonio Willens from I Am Rage 2. As always, lots going off in the world of straight-to-video right now. I'm regularly uploading video clips from the shows to my YouTube channel, and over at the 80s Video Shop in Alfreton, Derbyshire, we've just announced our Halloween Horror Day event for 2023, which will be held on Saturday the 21st of October, which also just happens to be Independent Video Store Day too. Once again, legendary horror artist Graham Humphries will be coming along. Graham, as many of you know, did the iconic artwork for such films as The Evil Dead and Nightmare on Elm Street 1 and 2 and Return of the Living Dead, amongst many others, and he'll be signing copies of his new book, A Nightmare on One Sheet, which you can pre-order from www.80svideoshop.co.uk and collect on the day to be signed by Graham himself. Really looking forward to this event, so hope some of you can make it along. So that's all for this episode, but I'll be back next Friday, so until then, always be kind, please rewind and unwind, and I'll speak to you all real soon.